Hello, I'm Hannah and welcome to my podcast, Don't Tell Me to Relax, the antidote to unhelpful fertility information. I'm a fertility acupuncturist and educator, and this podcast aims to empower and inform you about your menstrual cycle and your fertility. It's basically all that information you didn't get in sex education at school, with the aim of helping you improve your reproductive health and increase your chances of conception. I am here today with my lovely, let's say, partner in crime, Katie. Katie, do you want to say hello?
Hello, I am Katie Ewan and I am a reflexologist and fertility awareness coach. And yeah, I'm very excited to be co-hosting Don't Tell Me to Relax. Is it called Don't Tell Me to Relax?
It is called Don't Tell Me to Relax and the reason we chose this title is because so many people are told really unhelpful bits of information. And as we know, our clinics are full of people who are really pissed off with the unhelpful information and advice that they've been given, and overwhelmed and confused, I think, are another two words that I would use to describe the way that people are when they come to us in clinic. And so really, we met through the power of the internet, and we met because we both did lots of educational reels and information about fertility awareness and menstrual cycles, and it's a subject close to our hearts.
Yeah, the power of Instagram reels. They brought us together. So, they're good for something. And the other thing they're good for is fertility education.
Yeah.
I think, it's been a really great tool for delivering this information, because something that we're going to talk about time and time again is this information is quite difficult to find in a way, or difficult to find in a way that makes sense or is digestible. We were literally just speaking about research papers before we got on this call, and unless you're trained to read them, then how do you understand that information? And we're both really passionate about giving you, our dear listener, all the delivering you the information in a way that you're going to understand, that's easy to digest, that's hopefully entertaining and not really dry or really unhelpful, kind of confusing information. We're going to really boil it down and give you what you need.
Yes, and this really is for anybody who is trying to conceive, or maybe they're thinking about trying to conceive, or maybe they want to know more information about their fertility. They might be thinking about IVF or IUI or some kind of assisted conception. Wherever you're at in your journey to get pregnant, have a baby, start a family, then we hope this information is going to be helpful, because we believe no matter what stage you're at, that there's going to be something in this series that is going to support you and empower you while you're trying to get pregnant. So this first series is all about your menstrual cycle, understanding your menstrual cycle, and about fertility awareness, which, as we said, is a subject dear to our hearts that we talk a lot about.
We love it.
So, Katie, what would you say? Let's talk about what is the problem. So what is the current state of fertility education? What was your education like when you were at school? Around sex, not just general education, sex education.
General education. Sex education. So it's interesting that you, the way you phrase that question actually is fertility education. Be it was not fertility education, really. It was how to not get pregnant education.
Yeah.
And even that was very limited from what I can remember. All I remember was a teacher putting a condom onto, I don't know, a cucumber or a banana or something, and she had to wear latex gloves because she had to wear gloves because she was allergic to the latex, and just the whole thing was a bit strange. And then they showed us lots of other different contraception, or barrier methods of contraception.
Yeah.
So diaphragms and I can't remember half of it now, but anyway, and they were all
sponges,
sponges, and cervical caps and things, and But they were all hole punched, so no one could steal them. And I was like, this feels very counterintuitive. Like, why aren't you like handing out contraception rather than being like, this is what you could have, but we're not going to give it to you? I don't know. Very strange. And then I don't remember having any sort of education about the menstrual cycle. I vaguely remember being in a particular classroom, but I mean, it's very vague. But I guess it was my mum that told me more than anything. And she was really great with stuff in that, like, she never like hid the fact she had periods. Like there were like always tampons just around, and like the Tampax box on the side kind of thing in the bathroom. And like she bought a couple of books about it, so I kind of like understood like the basics of what was going on. But all I really knew was you had a period, and that was one thing, and then don't have sex because you'll get pregnant, and that was another thing. But then I mean, how
the two relate was something that I didn't know about till I was in my 30s, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah, I thought they were. I sort of thought it was that. I don't really, to be honest, I don't really think I thought about it very much.
What was your like education around it in terms of schooling? Or
I mean, I went to a Catholic school, so that was like a whole other layer of complexity around contraception and around sex education. We definitely had no sex education because obviously you weren't supposed to be having sex outside of marriage, which, you know, in the 1980s, early 90s, I think it was. It must have been 90s, 80s, was, you know, not a realistic situation to be in for lots of us. And it was also the time of HIV AIDS crisis. And so lots of the videos, I really remember a comic relief video, which was all about protecting yourself against HIV. And the part where it showed you how to use a condom, they turned it off and we weren't allowed to watch it in school. Yeah, because it was obviously, it was against, you know, the Catholic faith, and we were a Catholic school, and so they had to, you know, abide by those rules. So we really had very, very little. And, you know, what the overriding memory was that if you have unprotected sex, you will get pregnant. So that was like the bottom line. And I remember being absolutely terrified of getting pregnant. It was kind of like the worst thing that could happen to you as a teenager. And, you know, there was just this whole idea that contraception, well, I mean, this wasn't from school, but, you know, the general kind of wider society was, you know, contraception is the way that you don't have a baby. And that was it. That was the bottom line. And so that's actually what I thought, that if you're on contraception, you don't have a baby. And if you're not on contraception, you do have a baby. And I know that's like a really simple way to think about it. But I think
but we're not really taught much past that.
No, we're really not. Yeah. And so I think what happens is what we see in clinic is that people, when they want to try to get pregnant and they don't get pregnant, so it, you know, there's I guess there's a few groups of people, aren't there? There's people who start trying to conceive and they get pregnant immediately, or let's say they get pregnant 3 to 6 months. Yeah. And often those people, in my experience, they like to shout about it. So they're like, we just had to look at each other and we got pregnant, or, you know, he's got, often it'll be a man will be like, I've got super swimmers. You know, there's a lot of bravado and chat that goes on to those people who, you know, and you know, good on them, bless them, good luck to them. You know, what a fortunate place to be, in that you want to get pregnant, you do get pregnant, everything goes okay. And I think that group of society often don't necessarily understand that there is another group out there who come off contraception, or they're ready to conceive, maybe they weren't on contraception and they start trying and it doesn't happen, and then they're like, well, hang on a minute, this isn't what they said was going to happen to me when I was at school. And they start to become anxious and become fearful and wonder, okay, well, is there a problem? What is the problem? How do I find out if there is a problem, and where do I go?
Like the where do I go part, I think, is the thing that we're really trying to plug the gap kind of thing.
Because there is this real gap of information, because you could go to your GP, and your GP, and you could say, I'm struggling to get pregnant, it's not happened, and often they will send you away unless you've been trying for 12 months. Or, you know, often if you've got problems with your menstrual cycle, they won't necessarily always give you the time to sit down and really explore that further. I mean, what are the statistics around endometriosis and the time it takes to get a diagnosis? They're pretty horrific, aren't they?
Yeah, like 8 years, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
8 years.
Yeah.
It's just unacceptable.
It really is. And I think that kind of feeds into people when they're struggling to conceive as well, because I think often we've seen it in clinic a lot. People are sort of told, you know, carry on trying, come back if it's not worked. You've not given it long enough. So that's one approach. And so you then think, okay, maybe I want to go to a fertility clinic. Where else can I go to get fertility information? And a fertility clinic is there to deliver fertility treatment. They're not necessarily there to look at the holistic self. They're there to deliver IVF or IUI or ovulation induction. So you and me, we fit into the middle of that. I feel like we're the grey area in between.
Yeah, living in grey. That's what we want to be doing. When back in the day when I was a contemporary dancer, I wanted to make a piece and call it "Living in Grey" because I thought it was very artistic, and I don't know. But anyway, but that's what we want to be doing. We want to be that grey area.
We do. I mean, if it was up to me, I'd say it would be yellow, but you know, we'll go with
50 Shades of Yellow.
We'll go with grey, because we think that there is a place for educating yourself to understand all the different things that can impact your fertility. So this includes your menstrual cycle, it includes lifestyle activities that can impact, it includes supplements, it includes sleep, it includes the importance of male factor. All of these things can really help give you an overall picture of things that might be impacting your ability to conceive. And we need to talk about this more. We need people to understand more and educate themselves more so that they feel more empowered to do something about it if they're concerned, to get better treatment, to get the right treatment, and to get treatment as soon as possible. The worst thing I think we see a lot is that people turn to the internet or family and friends for information, and that's when what happens, like a whole host of information overwhelm. Dr. Google does not help. I mean, it can, you know, for some things it can, but other things it can send you into a spin. If you Google fertility help, there's 1,001 different things that come up.
Yeah, like so many different things. And the more you look, the more you'll find contrasting information. And I think that can be when a lot of people start to feel very confused or very anxious about any action that they take or any lifestyle things that they're doing. It's like things you're already doing as part of your lifestyle, and then suddenly reading something and being like, oh my goodness, that means that's the thing why I'm not getting pregnant. And then something else will be like, oh, that's fine. It's like, it can just be such a tricky place to know where to turn to, where to trust, and getting information that is actually going to be reliable, helpful. When there can be lots of different people offering their piece of information, which I guess is what we're doing, but we're hoping that this will be very practical, helpful, understandable, and like we're very aligned in what we believe. So
and also we're doing it from a place of fertility awareness. So
yes,
Katie, do you want to talk about fertility awareness? It's a good time to segue. Is that a word, or is that just a thing that you ride around on?
No, it's definitely that's radio spiel.
Segue it in. Tell us about fertility awareness, because it is a big thing that we talk about a lot.
Yes, we've probably mentioned it at least 10 times already. If it was a drinking game, this podcast, you'd be drunk for the amount of times we would talk about fertility awareness. But fertility awareness is being able to observe your signs of fertility and understand what they mean. So the key kind of things that we talk about in terms of fertility awareness are observing your cervical mucus. So when you're in the fertile part of your cycle is when you'll be producing cervical mucus or fluid discharge, depending on what term you want to use. Also by measuring your basal body temperature. So this is your temperature first thing in the morning that you can take, and it tells us or helps us to confirm when ovulation has happened, as there is a rise in our body temperature after we've ovulated. So when we see that your temperature's gone up and it stays up, then we know, yep, ovulation's happened. You can also use your cervical position to check where you are within terms of like your fertile window. The cervix changes how it feels and how high or low in the vaginal canal it is throughout the cycle, but that's not always a sign that people use because that does involve internally checking, and not everyone is comfortable with doing that. So they're kind of your three key signs. And then as well, your period is going to be a sign that you're going to be looking at in terms of how long your period is, how long it is from one to the next, how far away it is from when you ovulate, because that could be impacting your cycle. But being able to observe these things and understand what different things look like, so different types of cervical mucus when your temperature goes up, and knowing what those mean in relation to your fertility, and understanding that will really help you if you are trying to conceive.
Yes, exactly, because we know that when it comes to fertility, there are a number of things that we need to happen to maximize your chances of success. So you need a good menstrual cycle that's working well with good clear signs of ovulation. So you need to be releasing an egg, obviously, every single cycle. And then from the male factor side of things, if you have a partner and you're getting pregnant that way, then obviously we need good healthy sperm. And the other big area is obviously the environment. So the structural environment, we need there to be a healthy endometrium, a healthy uterus with which a egg can be fertilized, it can travel down the fallopian tube, and implantation can happen for that embryo. So there are three big areas that we look at when we are looking at somebody's fertility and looking at, maximizing their fertility and making sure that everything is working as it can. And I will say, because I think this is a really important part of fertility education and understanding fertility, is that we are given this myth that we talked about at the beginning, myself and Katie, about this idea that if you have sex, you get pregnant. Well, that is not the actual fact, because actually there are only about 5 days each menstrual cycle with which you can get pregnant. And even if everything is right, so even if the sperm is okay, the egg's being released, you're having enough sex, the environment is great, sometimes people don't always get pregnant. And to be honest, people don't know why. There is a big part of fertility information and education that we still don't understand. And this is true for natural fertility, and it is true for IVF or assisted conception, because we see it all the time. There are parts of this phenomenon that happens, this biological process that happens, that we don't understand. We don't understand for some people why they just don't get pregnant. And you can go, we see it all the time, people who try naturally, then they go for IVF, they try all kinds of different interventions. And I mean, they're not a lot of people, but for some reason, they just don't know why. And this idea of unexplained infertility is talked about a lot. And is there such a thing as unexplained fertility, or is it that there isn't enough science for us to explain why it is that couple or that person is not getting pregnant? So it's important that you kind of understand and control what you can control. I think this is what we say a lot in clinic, because there are a lot of things that we just don't understand and we just don't know about, but we know very clearly that having a good menstrual cycle and knowing what a good menstrual cycle looks like, and having a very clear idea about when you ovulate, is one of the best ways to give a good foundation to your fertility and to increase your chances each month. Would you agree, Katie? Have I made sense with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the fertility education is just so important, and you understanding, like, as best you can to give you the best chances. And in terms of the like unexplained infertility, I mean, how, like, it's so frustrating. And I can absolutely I would put a lot of money on the fact it's down to a lack of research
Yeah.
into largely women's health, but also like fertility as a
Yeah.
whole, and the combined factors of
Yeah.
fertility, and that it's as important the sperm is healthy.
Yeah.
Like
And this is a new big part of the world infertility that we're seeing a lot, isn't it? That there's more, for a long time, I think it was assumed that it was more female than male. And now it does feel like that is turning around, and there's a lot more understanding and appreciation that we need to be investigating men more. And I guess, whereas it's difficult for a man to know if there is a fertility issue, unless there's an underlying health condition or something that's quite obvious, it's really hard to know. But for a female, I think for some people, you can look at a menstrual cycle, for example, and you can make an assessment. Okay, if their period is painful and heavy, you have to be wondering, are there underlying conditions going on that could then be affecting their fertility? And this is why understanding your cycle is amazing, because it gives you clues that might help inform fertility information and fertility treatment and ways to approach your fertility that can help you. So that's
absolutely
why we bang on about it so much.
Definitely. Your menstrual cycle is often referred to as like a fifth vital sign. So we've got our other vital signs, so like your heart rate, your respiratory rate, can't remember the other two, but
blood pressure is that one?
Maybe, don't know, should know, don't know off the top. It's like the five senses. I always forget what one or two of them are when I'm like trying to reel them off, which is terrible, but I do. And but yeah, your menstrual cycle is sometimes referred to as a fifth, like another vital sign, because it can give us so many clues as to what is going on in the body. And I think something that's really important that I'm sure we'll talk about more at length throughout this podcast, but just because it's something you've always experienced doesn't mean it's like normal or optimal, perhaps. So like, just because you're like, oh well, my period's always been heavy and painful, so you kind of don't think of it as being a symptom anymore. It could be a real factor perhaps into why you're not able to conceive, or just as to why you're not feeling great more of the time. And it can be a real big clue as to what's going on.
Yes. And I've just to do a little bit of factual information and research.
Fun facts.
I always like a bit of research. There's actually been a study this year in Canada into fertility awareness and fertility education. And in the survey that they did, the vast majority of women were not aware that the week before they ovulated was actually their most fertile time. So, this idea that we understand our fertility is, that we're intelligent, informed people. Well, we are intelligent, informed people, but not when it comes to fertility. And this is the majority of people that we see in clinics say, why didn't I know this information? Why did I not realize that my fertile time was before? Why did I not know that cervical mucus was a sign that I was potentially fertile? And actually, all the studies show that people who do have an understanding of their menstrual cycle, who do track their cycle using fertile mucus, have an increased time to pregnancy. So they get pregnant quicker, because they start off trying to conceive with a really clear notion of when they should be trying to have sex, when their fertile time is, that their cycle is working well. So the science really backs up the information that we're talking about. And I don't think, it doesn't matter where you came from, what your educational background is, this stuff applies to everybody. Anybody who wants to try and get pregnant or wants to try and understand their menstrual cycle, we have not been given good enough information. So it's not, that some people have got it and some people went to some schools and they got it. It's across the board. It cuts through everything, doesn't it? I think we see that all the time.
Yeah, all the time. And I can't tell you how many people, when I've taken them through like the introductory fertility awareness session that I do, and they're like, how did I get to insert age and not know this? And you're completely right about, it's not a case of like, oh well, like, did you learn it at school or blah? Like, unless you're actively seeking out this information, and I say actively seeking out this information, like, you're probably just looking for like how to conceive, but like, unless you know to look and research what is cervical mucus. Like, why would you be Googling that unless you
Unless you
knew what
knew.
fertility? Yeah, like
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
And so
I've worked with people who have gone to the doctors thinking that they had thrush, or thinking
yeah,
that they had some kind of, vaginal health issue, and it was cervical mucus, and they're
yeah.
mortified when they find out. I'm like, don't be mortified. No one ever
No, it's
bloody
a
told
sign you're
us.
really healthy.
Yeah.
Like, and don't be embarrassed by it. Yeah, like, I mean, I honestly, I learned so much through doing my fertility awareness training that I
Yeah.
was like, oh, so that's normal.
Yeah.
Like, and like about like the when you get a dry patch of discharge in your knickers and being like, is that normal? It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it is. It's your vagina
Yeah.
cleaning itself.
Yes.
Like,
Yes. And it's again, about all those times that, people put up with it. It sort of goes back to the, episodes of repeat thrush. I've treated women who have had thrush for years, like 10 plus years in their life. And you think, it's not good enough that this has not been addressed properly, that we, for a long time, people, they haven't gone for help and support from a GP because they didn't think it was necessary. B, that it's been dismissed and they've been given antibiotics, or they've been given creams, and then it's not cleared up and it comes back again. And, that cycle, it sort of all stems from that kind of place of not enough information or education, that this doesn't have to be put up with, that there are solutions to these issues, that understanding what is happening and how your body works can really help empower you to get the right solution. And we've all been there, where we're suffering from things that should not be happening. Thrush is thrush and BV are like my new, like I'm taking them on head first, because it does my head in.
I mean, yeah, we see it a lot, don't we?
Yeah.
A lot.
So we are going to end today with the notion, or the suggestion, that we encourage you to think about tracking your cycle. So if you're not already doing this, then we are massive, massive fans of tracking your menstrual cycle, not only for your health, but also for your emotional well-being, and seeing how your cycle impacts your emotional health, your physical health, and all the different systems in your body. Because when you start tracking, and when you start realizing the impact that hormones can have, it's quite astounding that you suddenly like, oh, that's why. You ever have those days where you put on an outfit? For years and years and years, this was my number one question. Why can I put on an outfit one day and I'll go, yeah, that's all right, I like that. And then 2 weeks later, you're like, that is absolutely hanging. How can I even leave the house with that? Do you know what I mean? For years.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, it's just hormones, it's probably that one was, I was viewing myself in front of the mirror when I was in the first half of my cycle and I had loads of estrogen. And the other was probably, I was about 2 days before my period came, and there would have been nothing that would have been right at that point in time. And so if you have noticed these changes, then it's highly likely that it's linked to your cycle. And so if you're trying to conceive, if you're thinking about conceiving, if you're getting ready, or you are and you're not already doing it, then track your cycle. Katie, as a basic kind of premise, what would you encourage people to track? What's kind of like the simple place that you'd go to?
Yeah, I mean, the real, I guess, starting point for a lot of people is, so day one of your cycle is when your period starts, and that's when it starts in like full flow, so not any kind of spotting. So spotting when you get very light bleeding beforehand, so we don't count that as the start of your period. But when like you've got your full flow of blood coming through, that is day one. So starting like marking when that is and how heavy it is, and then for how many days it's like that, and then if and when it starts to taper off, or if it's got a very clear end, marking either of those things. So that's your real kind of like number one kind of starting point. And then next thing we want you to kind of be looking out for really would be the if you see any cervical fluid. So the best way to check it is just to get into the habit of getting some tissue paper and wiping across your vulva, ideally before and after you pee or poo. Just get into the habit of doing it all the time, and just seeing if there's anything, any kind of mucus, like egg white type stuff, or if there's creamy, lotiony stuff on the paper that you could pick up and kind of stretch between your fingers a little bit, and noting that down. And then that's going to give you a real indicator as to if you're in that fertile window or not. You can do basal body temperature if you want to as well, but I appreciate sometimes that can be a bit more advanced perhaps, but that is a really good thing to do. But for a real starting point, your period and cervical mucus are like your two top kind of things. And then any other symptoms you get throughout your cycle. So if you get any like tender breasts, any like spotting before your period, any mood changes, pain levels, like all of these things, like don't think that a symptom's like too small to note, perhaps, like we were saying earlier, just because you've always experienced it. Don't think that that's like kind of normal. Like for me, the thing that I was just like, oh, it's really normal to feel utterly awful for 10 days before your period. No, it is not. But I was so used to that I was like, oh, it's fine. It's like, no. So just noting down any kind of like emotional changes, physical changes, cravings for food, if that changes, energy levels. I mean, you could really go into it if you want to, but just start off with a couple of things, and as you get used to tracking, you can add more and more in.
Brilliant. And so in the notes on this, there should be a link to trackers. There are 2 trackers that we've got available. One is around symptoms, as Katie's just discussed, and the other one is around BBT, which we will go into in a later episode. But both charts are there. They're completely free if you want to download them. So let us know how you're getting on. If you've not tracked before, or if you want any more information, you are very welcome to contact myself or Katie. We are always around, and we look forward to hearing from you. We hope you have found this helpful and enjoyable, and we look forward to you joining us next week when we're going to be looking all about menstrual cycles. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you. We'll see you next week.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope you have learned something helpful about your reproductive health and your fertility. If you would like to find out more information, then please come and join us in our free community on Facebook. We have tons of resources, access to our webinars, we do live Q&As, and it's a chance to connect with other people who are trying to conceive. The link to register is in our show notes, and we hope to see you there.